Okay, welcome to the Hartford Board of School Directors. This is a school board retreat. I would like to call this meeting to order. Do we have any changes or additions to the agenda? Okay, none that I see. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Okay. Jeannie?
Great.
Unless you tell me differently, we're going to turn it straight over to Jeannie. Okay, Jeannie.
All right.
The show is yours, and welcome.
And thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm sorry I'm not there in person. I will be there in 2 weeks, but you won't be. So this is what we And I also apologize for Debbie. We had scheduled that Debbie Singiser would be in person, and we would do this in tandem. And as we're putting everything to bed on Sunday night at 7:00, I get a call from her saying, "Oh no," and she cannot be there today, and she sends her apologies. So I recognize, I start with that because I recognize that a virtual only training is not ideal because I can't really read the room. I mean, if you're talking, the camera will show me your face, but if you're rolling your eyes and not talking, I can't tell. So you'll need to monitor yourselves and fill me in, stop me if I'm like way out in left field and left you guys behind and I'm missing something along the way. I know it's not as fun. I do look forward to seeing you in person in September, and that one will be in person, and we'll continue it then. Today, we have just 2 things that we really want to do. That's not so bad, right? You. Like, this other computer I have that maybe I could still see faces, but I'm not sure. So the 2 things that we'd like to do is ultimately leave today with an annual agenda, at least draft agenda. It might have to be tweaked after this meeting, and then create an agenda for the next board meeting. Now, those sound like pretty innocuous things to do, but actually it's part of the work that I've been doing with you to help your board meetings get back on track from a governance perspective and be effective. And so there's teaching along the way in what we're doing today, but it's also, we're going to end up with products. So, and I also have a recommendation to change your agenda planning policy. So we'll talk about that as well. So any questions about the 2 work products that we're shooting for today? Okay. So I'm not going to go over these. I just put up the slide to remind you of the principles of policy governance. And in particular, we're working today under the governance process policies that talk about how the board does its own work. And we're going to touch a little bit on board means. That's really what today is. We're going to touch a little bit on owner connection and board holism. Heard something, but I don't know what it was. Did somebody say something?
No.
Nope.
Okay. All right. So I did, to help this happen, since I'm virtual and who can read a screen, right? I did ask for some handouts to be given to you, and I think they were sent in advance. And we're going to start by looking at your own policy on agenda planning, and you should have it in a handout. And what your handout actually is the original policy with some crossouts. But at the second page of that, of the one with the crossouts, is the original one. And that's the one I'm going to talk about right now. So page 2, current GP4 agenda planning. If you can find that, or read the screen if you prefer. I want to unpack this policy just for a minute. So as a school board, you are legally required to govern the school district. That is what you have been charged to do by the state of Vermont. That means there are details within that, but ultimately you are the responsible party for the school district. And you hire staff to help you do that. And you govern that staff, you set the direction of the district, and the staff helps you do your job, but also the staff carries out what you tell it you want it to do. So this policy is how you have defined in policy how you will handle your agenda and planning, both for meetings and also for a year-long plan. You do have a semblance of a year-long plan, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, but we're going to revise it a little bit to help make it more effective. So let's look at the policy itself. It says that you will follow an annual agenda that re-explores the ends policies annually and continually improves the board performance through board education and enriched input and deliberation. It says that your cycle is going to conclude each year on the last day of August. I'm going to recommend that you change that to June so that the administrative planning and budgeting can be based on 1 year segments of your most recent statement of long-term ends. The cycle starts with your development of an agenda for the year. And in the making of that agenda, it says that you'll consult with selected groups of the ownership or other methods of gaining input. That will be built into your agenda, especially focused on the first quarter of the year. It also says that governance education and education related to ends determination will be arranged also on your agenda in the first quarter of the year. And what that means is it means that you're going to have some, at least annually, you're going to talk about what's impacting education, what's impacting what you can provide to your kids. Is it enrollment? Is it merger discussions? Is it AI, cell phones in the school? What are the trends that are happening for you to help you stay current and future focused? The second part is a board member. Then it talks about your board agendas. A board member can recommend or request an item for board discussion by submitting the item to the chair at least 5 days before the board meeting. And throughout the year, you're going to tend to consent agenda items as expeditiously as possible, and only the majority of the board can remove an item. I crossed out 4 and 5 because they actually have nothing to do with agenda planning. So don't worry about 4 and 5 right now. Any questions on that policy at the moment? Let me stop sharing right now. Any questions on any of that?
Are these your own words, or do these come from? These came from. No, the blue text came from.
Oh, the blue. I'm not on the blue, Daniel. You are too far ahead of me. Yes, I'm not on the blue yet. I was on page 2. So yes, yeah, no worries, no worries. Thank you for pointing it out. So the policy I just read is the policy that you have had in place. I didn't write down the date, but you started in 2008, so it could go back that far. I'm not sure. So now, because Daniel opened the door for me, let's look at the blue that I gave to you, the blue, the cross out in blue ink. I recommend, based upon other policies and the template policies from Carver's, etc., I recommend that you add a few things in there and maybe clarify a few things. As I was reading through your agenda policy, there's kind of no real delineation between your annual agenda planning and the one statement about the regular board meeting agendas. We call the annual agenda, we also call it a work plan, which is one way to differentiate it from meeting agenda. You do talk about in yours about, okay, right now I'm looking at the first page that has the blue language. You do talk about A and B in my blue language, complete a review of the ends policy annually and continually improve board performance through board education. But you don't really talk about providing a mechanism to record and save opportunities for improvements and allow the board to meet legal obligations. And that's normally in the policy. So it's not exactly my words. It really comes from Carver guidance, but I recommend you consider putting that in. Then I recommend that you have your cycle conclude in June. So that actually, I mean, if you were to conclude your cycle the last day of August and kids are already in school, it makes it more difficult for staff to kind of gear up and get ready for what you want to do. Whereas if you end it in June and then in August you do your work plan at your retreat, then it's just a more natural flow. So that's only a recommendation on my part. I also recommend in number 2, the chair will provide a report of the board's work from the last year and will create an annual work plan presented to the board for review no later than the last scheduled meeting of the planning year or the summer retreat. So that means either in June or in August. And it will be approved at the first meeting of the new school year. So that's just a recommendation. Cleaning up language in A, that those are things, these A and B are things that you're making sure you're putting into that annual work plan. And then number 3 starts to talk about the meeting agenda itself. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this. I just want to show you a different way of doing it. So the meeting agenda itself, again, you already say a board member may recommend or request an item for board discussion. But then I recommend, I actually stole this language from Rutland City and Taconic and Green school boards, where they actually put right in the policy itself to help the community and anybody understand how items are screened out for the agenda. You may choose to put these questions right in your policy. You may choose not to, but whether you put them in or not, it's up to the chair to interpret this policy. And this is likely how the chair would interpret agenda item requests. Does the issue belong to the board or superintendent? What category of policy does it relate to? And what has the board already said in this category, and how is this issue related? So that's a recommendation. 4 is the same. And then I still crossed out 4 and 5. So I'm just spending a few minutes on this because this may be a revision to your policy that you want to consider. You can't consider it today. It hasn't been warned. This is just giving you an opportunity to talk about it, ask questions about it. And if you wish to consider it, then it would go on your next board agenda as a first reading for your discussion, etc. Any questions on the revision recommendations?
So who owns the pen now? If you're suggesting that this is a warning and for discussion for the next meeting, I mean, who owns the pen for
You.
what? Okay, me.
Yeah, no, your board.
The board. Well,
yeah.
We're 5 people, so who owns the pen?
Yes. Oh, that's a really good question. So if you wanted to consider this revision to your policy, then the process is you would put it on your next board agenda and warn it as a policy. You always have to warn policies. You need 2 warnings. That's Vermont law. You, the board, then would discuss, do we like these revisions? Do we like the language in these revisions? Do we want to change the language? That's as a board. And then as a board, you come to a conclusion. So you own the pen, you, the board. It's not a single person. You, the board, owns it and owns the policy and tweaks it the way that as the board as a whole, you'd like to see it written. And then it would go forward for a second reading.
Let me be more specific. When this is warned, in the package that goes to the public, does the public see the black only, or does the public see the black and blue?
Black and blue. You would want to
warn policy. You obviously have written the blue. None of us have written the blue. Who owns the pen such that the blue that goes into the packet is blue that we're all comfortable with?
I think I did answer that.
I'm not sure I understood the answer to that.
Yeah, you're going to decide if you're going to decide the final policy language. You, the board, as a board, because you speak as one voice as a board. So through discussion, your board will discuss this language and either change it or accept it or drop it.
I understand all of that. My question is, let's say we want to discuss this. It has to be warned. Goes into the package. You're saying what goes into the package has blue text in it.
Yes.
You and you alone have written the blue text.
Yes.
How does this board write the blue text that goes into the package?
The way the board does anything is to warn an item.
Then shouldn't the warrant item be only black text and none of the blue? And then
It
during
does.
the meeting, we discuss the blue.
Ideally, if you are going to discuss the blue, your public knows what you're discussing the same time you know, and that's why the blue goes out as well. But between that first and second reading, you can make any changes you want to that blue.
Who, me?
Board as a-
Right,
You
but
as-
there are 5 people.
So I think the question is without falling into open meeting law traps, how does that first initial revision with the blue make it into the warning packet?
Is that the question, Daniel? Thank you,
think
Jeremy.
so. because
That's a reiteration.
A board of
question,
5, we
yes.
can't really,
Thank you.
we can't discuss it in email because it violates
Right.
open meeting law. And so I think his question is, how do we get the initial version of the blue?
Right. That's not your initial version of the blue, it's our version of the blue.
Sure.
So do we add it as an agenda item to discuss? And then we talk about it and literally write the blue during one meeting and then warn the blue during the next meeting?
My recommendation is that today, when we get down to putting agenda items on your next board agenda, you, the board, decides if you want to put forward the recommended changes, which means the blue goes in the packet, or if you, the board, wants to just discuss the whole policy and not put forward the recommended changes, in which case it's not a warning, it's just a discussion item on your next. You can decide that today as part of this retreat because it's part of what we're doing is building your agenda. You can also, so you could decide today, when we get to that part, you, the board, you could say, yes, we want to discuss policy GP4 annual agenda planning. And you can say, yes, we want to discuss it the way it currently is, or we want to discuss the recommended policy. And you choose which one you're going to put forward in the agenda. You also could say, we don't want to discuss it at all. Nothing goes forward. So that can happen today. There's no decision other than an agenda item that's happening today. So that can happen today.
Since you're also training us as part of our training, let's say there's this policy right here, all in black, and I'd like to have it warned so we can discuss it. Now, how does it come with blue text? Do I write blue text and say, fellow board members, I'd like this warned with blue text on it that I wrote, just the same way that you wrote? Is that how it happens?
Yes. So are you asking me, Daniel, if you yourself had recommendations to this, how would that end up in front of the board?
Exactly, the same way that you have recommendations.
Right. I took the floor because I have the big head on the camera and you don't get that. So yes. So yes, when you have the discussion or even in advance, you could say to Nancy, I also have recommendations for this policy. Let's put that on the next agenda. On the next agenda, you could actually have 2, 3 versions for people to discuss all as one agenda item, and you work your way through where you want it to land.
Got it. Thank you.
Jeannie, I think we're making this a little more difficult than it needs to be. In my mind, we could have an issue that deserves a policy that's currently in place that we think should be rewritten, modernized, brought up to date. It could be one of the policies that the state foists upon us, where blue is handed to us and we can start with that. Or it might be that back to my first example, it could either be that we start a board discussion already having your blue work or my blue work or anybody else's blue work, maybe something that VSBA has suggested as a start to the discussion. Or we can start with a blank sheet of paper at the board table and create a brand new policy, or wipe away the entire old policy and create a brand new policy to replace something that's already there. So I think for us to be most efficient at the board table, in a lot of cases, we're gonna have suggested language changes to a policy provided to us. It might be one board member that's leading the charge and has drafted a proposed change. Or it could be language from VSBA or from the state. So that we'll start the discussion of a new policy or a modified policy with the suggestion already in place, provided to us, that we can start to build from and change, modify to make it our own. Or we can just identify a weakness in our policies and start with a blank sheet of paper. But that probably means there's gonna be at least one extra meeting in the cycle to get that policy approved, because we'll have a policy writing discussion,
Mhm.
which then will have to be warned twice, rather than having it warned with suggested language that we can discuss and perhaps approve as is or with minor changes. So,
Plus, you'd have a legal review if you start from scratch.
yes, so starting from scratch might make it a better process, but makes it a longer process.
Yeah.
It's probably more desirable in most cases to start with somebody's suggested improvements to a policy or to a new, or draft of a new policy for us to consider, that gets us moving faster right off the bat in the first session. That could be the warned first reading. You know, and an example of that would be, I think Jeremy and Kathy have both brought state AOE policy changes to us for consideration. Mostly Jeremy. I don't know
It's
if
the
you did or
VSBA,
not.
she's not on the policy, but, and it's one of the
Okay,
committees.
so
that-
it's been
yeah.
coming from Jeremy, but it's boilerplate from AOE.
From
or
VSBA.
VSBA.
That's legally
And-
reviewed.
And we're pretty much rubber stamping it without changes. We're actually missing the opportunity to read it carefully and make changes if it's appropriate to, but having that draft policy provided to us up front lets us handle the entire process in 2 meetings, first and second readings.
Right.
If we address what I think are Daniel's concerns, that we don't bring in blue revised language up front, it's just gonna make the process at least one more meeting long, plus the legal review that you just mentioned. So it's a little
That's-
slower, but maybe it yields a better result.
Policies usually come to the board either already pre-written based on the law. That's what the VSBA required policies are. They've had a lawyer look at the latest legislation and write the policies based on that. And you have a little wiggle room, but not a lot. Or a policy comes forward usually because somebody wants to recommend a change or some new idea. So something comes to you to react most of the time. You seldom start with somebody started with a piece of scratch paper, but fresh piece of paper, but it comes to the board for reaction and discussion. And it can be multiple versions. I mean, you can have policies where, there are 2 different approaches to it and the board wants to discuss both approaches, and that's perfectly fine. But they're still usually reacting to something. Or they're sending it back out to be wordsmithed after the discussion and it still comes back for discussion.
Adding the blue text requires the legal review to make sure that it's not changing the intent of the policy.
Right. School board jail. Any other questions on I mean, you don't need to have the discussion about it right now, but any other questions on either the changes or even back to our original agenda, the idea of an annual agenda as well as a meeting agenda? Any questions on that concept? Excellent. Okay. Let's move on.
You're not you're not suggesting that you want this revised annual agenda policy ironed out today.
No, I don't. I don't think you can because it wasn't warned. The most you can do today is say, yeah, we're interested in talking about this. Let's put it on the next agenda.
If we're gonna wait and put it on the next agenda, I've got a number of concerns with the new language as well as the old. So I anticipate that it's gonna look a little different than it looks as you've produced it.
That often happens. Yeah.
So we could work some of that out today if there's time in the schedule to do it, or we can wait till next time and not warn it as a policy change, but just have a like a workshop discussion in a board meeting of this new policy or proposed change in policy.
Yep, you could.
Warn it the next time for a first reading.
Daniel looks like he's trying to say something.
That was mine too, because if we're gonna put something in a packet, I want the words to be our words, not somebody else's words, unless it's VSBA that we, as the committee, said, okay, these are our words as well.
Well, I might disagree with that because I'm
Okay.
because I'm disagreeable. I might want to draft a new policy and bring it to the board and say, I really don't
Right.
like.
Your words, one of our, somebody,
Yeah,
but it has to be
Yeah.
us.
well, it could be, maybe it's somebody in the community that's looked at a policy of ours and says, that really stinks. Let me take a crack at rewriting it. And we should consider that if they raise something
The
like
same way we would consider it as the VSBA gave it to
Yes.
us. Yes.
that. Exactly.
And so the way that could
If it
happen,
would have been legal, then theirs wouldn't have been legal. Sure.
I did not assume that you would want to discuss this today because you just saw it. I mean, it just flashed in front of your eyes. You know, well, I guess you got it digitized to you a couple days ago, but I'm sure it's fresh to you. So you might want to do some research on your own. So that, going back to Daniel's point, in that case, on the next agenda, I would put discussion of GP for annual agenda policy and put in your current one. And then have people bring your ideas. And so what the public sees is the current one and knows that's the policy being discussed. And then you can do whatever you'd like with it.
If that's it, or if we want to do something else that's more urgent. Yeah.
Jeannie, may I ask a question? I heard you say that there isn't much wiggle room really based on the fact that the policies are based on statute. I guess what I'm wondering about is where that threshold is, right? Like I'm hearing like, hey, if someone brought up something from the community, for example, the board should consider it while also being transparent about the limitations of that threshold potentially. I guess
Yes.
also pragmatically, I guess, and maybe like thinking about being like fiscal stewards, it's far more expensive legally because we rely on counsel, right? To continue to iterate with counsel to make sure that we're kind of within the legal framework we need to be in. I would imagine that that's probably why a lot of districts just kind of like, yes, VSBA, thank you for doing the legal expensive work to make sure that this policy suits our needs. But I guess my question is like, I would love to know more about where that wiggle room is.
Sure.
And how we might maybe research that too, so that we can, I think, be really honest
Well, I think
with the community and also be like sincere
No.
in our consideration of what they're bringing to us potentially.
I think what Jeanne was suggesting was that the policies that come from the AOE or from legislation or from VSBA are typically the boilerplate policies required by statute that eventually trickle down through AOE or VSBA. There's probably very little wiggle room because they've already been wordsmithed and lawyered to death, and what we see is probably what we have to approve.
Right.
But the pure policy governance policies, all the rest of the policy document is ours. And if we want to go off rails a little bit and stray from pure policy governance, we can do that. Or we can have somebody like Jeanne writing her on policy governance so that at the end of the day, if we try to make changes to a statutory policy,
Mhm.
then we can do it. But it would be nice to have somebody, not our lawyer, but perhaps our policy governance person, review it to say, this doesn't really meet the expectations of what policy governance is. Adopt it at your own risk.
At your own peril.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
That makes sense.
I'm going to tell Debbie that she wasn't needed today, that Colin's just going to fill in for her. That was very good. Thank you. Yes, you're right. So the VSBA required policies that come from them are generally based on legislation and written by the attorney hired by VSBA, so that not every school district has to hire an attorney, so that they are lined up with legislation. And therefore, your tweaking is minor. You get to put in your school district name maybe, and it's minor. Your policy governance policies are based on these principles. So you just have to remember that you already have a policy committing to lead by policy governance. And what that means is that you want to create any tweaks that you want in this. You want to help it be super clear so that everybody understands what it means, understanding that you have given the board chair the authority to interpret governance process policies. You gave her authority in policy, and that it aligns with these principles. Principles are only principles. It's not a checklist. You just want to make sure you're not violating any principle. And then you can change. So for example, in my language, those questions, you might not want the screening questions on there at all. You might not want to end your school year in June. I mean, your governing year in June. You might, there's nothing that says you have to have an annual work plan, but having an annual work plan, your policy says, but I mean, there's no law out there. So you could take out the idea of an annual agenda, an annual work plan, but that means that you are governing kind of not really sure what you're going to do next. Like it's a planning process to make sure that your year is moving smoothly based upon information that you have at the time. Trying to figure out how to get back to you guys on here. Oh, stop sharing. Okay.
Jeannie, can I make a comment? This is Nancy. I'm really concerned to hear that somebody wants to step out of policy governance and not abide by what policy governance is, which is what our board has done in the past and was a complete disaster, as we all know. So I am concerned that, and we can talk about it when we're talking about this other policy, but I am really concerned that I hear that, because that is not what we agreed to serve while we're serving as a policy governance board.
So then the responsibility of the rest of the board is to abide by your policies and not accept the recommendations if they violate a principle of policy governance. I mean, it's any one person can have an idea and bring it forward and probably deserves a discussion about it, or the board can choose not to discuss, but that's an action of the board. In other words, you act as the voice of the board. That's one of your principles. And one of your policies already says that you're going to follow policy governance principles. So that already exists. So if something comes forward to you, whether it's a community member or a board member, it doesn't matter, and it violates the policy governance principles that you have committed to in policy, then as a board, by vote, by majority, you would say, no, this violates our principles, so we're not able to move this forward. And that's how that would work.
Thank you.
And Nancy, I was not suggesting that we stray from policy governance. I was simply using that as a radical example of how far we have, how much leeway we have in writing policy, as long as it's not something associated with some statutory requirement handed down from above. We can make the policy anything we want. we can completely abandon policy governance if the board decides to. But as long as we're in policy governance, it probably makes sense to stick to it.
Mhm.
I'm just using the example of, if it's not a state mandated policy, we can make it whatever we choose as 5 board members.
Yep, I agree with you.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Anything else on this topic? I like to start off with controversy right at the very beginning, because now I'm paying attention.
Everyone's confusing.
No, it's no controversy. It just took me a while to figure out what was being asked. I'm sorry about that. Okay, let's go back to our actions, what we're going to do next. Let me go back to the slides. Okay, I'm going to stop the review. I don't know why it won't change slides on me. Okay, there we go. That's why. Okay, you have in your packet a document that looks like, it's called the 26-27 annual agenda. It's very pretty. Erin has spent many, many hours creating this for you, Erin and Katie. And I'm going to actually link to the document itself. And this is going to form the basis of how we're going to create an agenda. So this is the first tab of the first page of the document. You don't have it in tabs because you have hard copy. Am I correct about that?
Yeah.
Correct.
What we have is different than what you're displaying.
You should have 2 different things, and one of them should be this one. You have, these are the policy governance, PG, policy monitoring cycle. And it has your ends, your executive limitations, your management definition, your governance process policies. You have that?
She doesn't have green up in the last column at the top. This one does.
I have green here.
Oh, you just don't have the whole
Yeah, I think the
slide
same.
displayed, where it's truncated for some reason.
But do you have this information on it?
Yep.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I think so.
Okay. So last year, this is really a great document. So last year, you had some interim ends reports given to you, but the policy as a whole was not discussed. I changed actually the adopted language, Erin, that you had on your old version to monitored, because it's actually monitored. So you have here identified over the last year, when you monitored what policies. And you'll see that there are some, and I arbitrarily pick dates for a reason of common sense, but there are some that you did not get to, which is normal. When you have either a board that's new to policy governance, or you have a superintendent that's new to the district, then you usually take 2 years to go through a full monitoring cycle. And after that, you can update it annually. So this is very typical, what I would see. So you haven't yet, as a board, looked at monitoring reports and therefore discussed your financial conditions policy, financial planning, asset protection, communication and support to the board, and race and equity. Does that make sense to you, how this is set up?
Mhm.
And then you as a board are responsible for board management delegation and governance process policies. You have considered, and again, I changed them to monitored, and which ones were not yet considered. Well, no way that one says not considered. There's no policy there, but it's okay. You haven't considered the policy. So there is some that you haven't yet considered, which is also, it's very admirable to me how much you got through last year. Boards actually struggle more getting through all of their policies because there's so much else on the board plate and you have very little meeting time to do it in. But you did do quite a few last year. So you also have a few to carry over this year. Okay. Now I'd like you to look at the other handout that's similarly, by the way, Erin, I have no idea how you created some of your rows and stuff. So this will have to be cleaned up, and I'm sorry. But You're talented with Excel more than I. You have this one that has on the left-hand side, policies 0, 1, 2, has consent agenda, ends, executive limitations, BM delegation. Do you have that?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. This is what you're going to try to create in this meeting. And I only pointed out the other one because I wanted to show you how I moved things over. So, for example, you have meetings on these dates. I wasn't quite sure how you were handling September since I'm coming on the 14th. I didn't know if you were still meeting on the 16th, but I put it in. These are the dates according to the calendar for first and third weeks of the month that you are meeting throughout the year. Does that make sense?
These
Yeah.
are all 2025 dates.
No, I thought I changed them. Didn't I?
No. Not on this printout, no.
This one?
9/2 is not a Wednesday.
All right, this one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so now the dates are on the, okay.
Yep.
All right, okay.
Yeah, I thought that 9/2 was the first Wednesday. So yeah, okay.
Mhm.
So those are the dates. On each agenda, you need to consider, is there a consent agenda you're going to have on every meeting agenda, right? Because you always have minutes to approve. And I put in there some other things that are often in consent agenda, such as approving professional hires. The state of Vermont says that you have the final approval of certified staff. Approving bids often goes on consent agenda. Tuition approval, you have to set your tuition in January, etc. So those are just some ideas of some other things. It's not end all. It's just some suggestions. So as I scroll across the year, I left alone just the minutes plus that you had, except when I got to the part of the year where I knew you'd have to do tuition approval, or later on you'll see where I knew you had to approve the budget, et cetera. So those things are, if those are just consent agenda items. Is there any question about consent agenda items? Those are items that really are routine approvals that are almost totally operations, and therefore the board is not really involved with it. But the board has the statutory obligation to take action on them. You use a consent agenda, right?
Right.
That's already there. So any question on consent agenda and how it works? Right. So that's interesting. You aren't with me, are you? You're still on that page, but I'm not. I'm hoping that we're looking at the same thing when I'm scrolling across that, but I needed to switch to this. Okay, this is what I'm talking about. Now, does it look familiar?
We don't see anything.
You don't?
Share your screen, Jeanne.
I did. Share this tab to meet.google.com. I did. Try it again. Okay. The share screen just grayed out on me. Oh, there it comes.
Popped up for a second a little while ago and then disappeared again.
Okay. I thought it had popped up. Is it there now?
Nope.
No.
No, nothing's coming up, is it? Okay.
Oh, it popped up again. And now it's
there?
disappeared again. Nope.
Why would it pop up and go away?
I don't know.
Google.
Google. That's what my husband would say. He is not a Google fan. Okay, it's definitely a tab that I have set up. So I'm back.
Only a multi-billion-dollar company.
Right.
Trying their best.
Give them some grace.
Entire
Any company on this planet that does not deserve grace.
try moving it to the window and see if that helps. Nothing. You have nothing.
Nothing, yeah.
Wow.
Got
There you
it.
go.
Got it.
Don't touch anything.
Yeah.
Don't touch anything. Gotcha.
Sudden movement.
Okay. So now you can see what I'm talking about when I talk about the dates across the top. Now it makes sense. Okay. All right. Your ends, you want to touch base on your ends throughout the year. Generally, when it's the first time through for, in this case, a new superintendent on the ends, what I and because so many board members are new to your own policies, my recommendation to Katie was that at some point during the year, she bring her interpretation of the ends, and we kind of spend some time unpacking that interpretation before she brings evidence. So somewhere during the year, you and Katie are going to have to mutually agree on what month is best. I think I put it in February, but that's arbitrary. So you guys would actually decide. There may be times as well throughout the year where where Katie will bring you interim ends reports. If there's something to deal with your ends policy, such as maybe the SIP plan, which I think you were listening to a report on that when I last was with you in June, or some data from anything else, suspension data, anything. There may be times throughout the year that she's going to bring you some interim reports, and she and her staff would need to figure out what those are. And part of that's because some of them are required to come to you, like SIP is required to come to you. But ultimately, at the end of the second year, next year, you would all totally understand the interpretation of the ends, because at some point this year, you're going to spend some time unpacking that. And then Katie and her team are going to start collecting the data so that you should on an annual basis starting next year get a report that shows progress towards your ends. Ends is a policy that is never fully achieved because your population changes too often. The best you could do is maybe pick 2 pre-K to 12 students who are with you all the way through and see how they did, but that's not what you've got in front of you. You have a constantly changing population, but you can see trends and you can see where changes are made and where are you in the process towards reaching the ends. You can see if you're falling back altogether. So that would be scheduled onto your agenda throughout the year. And my suggestion is that we kind of take a minute now to decide mutually decide, the board and Katie, where you think an ends interpretation might go. And Katie, if you are aware of any of the interim reports that you want to bring forward, you may not be aware till after this meeting till you talk to staff, but if you are aware, you can plug them in.
Jeannie, do our current policies have dates for monitoring and review?
No, what your current policy says is that whether or not it'll be done annually or internal or external or et cetera. But each year you together determine the dates. To be honest, once you get this cycle going, the dates for monitoring reports seldom change because there's a flow to the school year. You don't want your business officer spending time writing you a policy monitoring report when they're building the budget, for example. So that's why I put it right after budget building is all done. That's a more natural time, or September could be another natural time. There's a flow that develops, and it isn't a 1, 2, 3, 4 flow according to policy numbers. It's a flow by topic that fits into the year. So what I did, I also know that you do have in one policy quarterly financial management reports, which I assume are coming in September, December, March, and June. If those dates are wrong, because I'm making assumptions, then you can adjust them. But so, for example, that's written into a policy. So put it right on the agenda. You don't have to recreate the agenda all the time and try to remember these things. Put it right on your annual agenda.
You're saying
Budget
that policy does have the dates in it.
It has quarterly. So since your fiscal year starts in July, I pick September, December, March, and June for quarterly.
So they're not in the policy.
Right. The date itself doesn't, but the term quarterly financial management report is
Okay.
right. Your budget process. I know that generally speaking, in October, you get a presentation of your budget. It might be October, it might be November. I think for today's work, I chose the first meeting in November. Again, Katie and you might know better if it's October 21st versus November 4th or November 18th. But you kick off your budget process with some administrative budgets that come forward to you, and you determine what you're comfortable with for an inflationary increase and the implications. That kicks off your budget official work. Then you do some work with the community, modeling tax rate, continue budget discussion. Again, you present to the community, and that could be in your meeting itself, but you start hearing back from the community about that. And then ultimately, on 120, you would need to approve your budget and the warning. Because, is that what I said? Yeah, presentation of budget, adopt budget, and annual warning. Because that's the last date that you can do it in and still warn your budget. So that one is pretty specific. So does that sound familiar for how you do your budget process? You start a conversation in the fall, you kick it back and say, we like this, we don't like this, we want you to stay within X%. And Katie comes back and says, okay, staying within X% means that I'm cutting another $1 million, which means that it's probably going to come from these areas, and then comes back to you and you're like, well, we're not quite comfortable with that deep a cut. That kind of back and forth happens, right? In November, December, January.
I mean, I guess what I'm wondering,
No.
Jeannie,
Go ahead.
is just given what we're up against this year, which is like, we have to shave
3.7.
our budget
Yeah.
considerably off the top. I would imagine that we would want to build in far more budget discussion and perhaps even determine what our budget agenda in and of itself looks like this year and lay
Yes.
it out. Because I wouldn't think that we would want to, you know, have to kind of scatter plot and add meetings as we go, knowing we're already in this position we know we are. What can we do to forecast through this annual work plan some of the things we know are coming up or are there for us? Significant budget reduction. We've got the seesaw conversation. We have the district merger conversation. We're still talking about PCDs. How do we plant that in here without it feeling, because correct me if I'm wrong, board
You're
members,
right
but
on.
like, it seems like we've been really reactive and we've been kind of like catch as catch can with our agenda. And that doesn't feel good to anybody because it leads us to not feel prepared. And it doesn't really give the public an opportunity necessarily to feel engaged and a part of that either. So
Right.
I'm just wondering, like, how do we do that? And how do we even earmark time predicting that we might need it for any number of reasons to talk about any number of these topics without them just surprise, here it is on this day, no one's really all that prepared or ready to talk about it, including the public who would want some advance notice as well.
I'd like to
Right.
take a crack at that. I wasn't on the board until March, so I'm going on my recollection from just sitting in the audience listening to board meetings, but I don't recall either while I was in the audience or when I eventually joined the board, getting a financial report on a quarterly basis or any other basis. I think we heard from Jacob just a couple months ago that things looked okay, but it was simply a verbal report and not anything in writing. As far as the budget goes, I don't recall the board having any substantive budget discussions until very, very late in the process. There were a few very anecdotal comments made early in the process, and then I think Jacob went away and put a budget together with the resources available to him on staff. And the board didn't see a budget until pretty late in the process.
Okay.
What I would suggest, and I think this is what I was hearing from Katie just now, that there really isn't an established process that fits budget discussions into board meetings through the fall, arriving at the town annual school district annual meetings. We ought to take a look at what the town of Hartford does, because they've got a very, very robust budgeting process that starts right now. They're going to be having conversations in the next meeting or two that will set the stage set the tenor for what the budget might be. I don't know that they're anticipating any significant shortfalls like the school district is, but they're going to have conversations about what their expectations are about how much leeway there is to letting the budget increase or to hold the budget constant. And they will be directing the town manager to inform department heads that budgets are going to stay the same, or there's going to be room for a 3 or 5% increase. That's all done probably by the end of September. And then from then on, they have regular meetings. They have extra town board meetings to focus solely on budgeting, apart from everything else that they have to do. And they have a department come in and make a presentation. That's a little different than the way the school district operates.
It is.
The town is not a policy governance operation.
It's not because of policy governance. It's because the budgeting year is different for the school district and the town. And the cycle and the information that you receive is a little different. But generally, especially given what Katie just said about information coming from the state about the cuts you have to make, the reductions you have to make, what you have to live in, the merger process, the forming of the V.S.A committee, the forming of the merger committee, all of that. I would recommend that you actually start with some education early on, whether it's in September, certainly no later than October 7th. But if you can, again, what I'm putting in here is still draft, but education, where am I? So you can see what I'm doing. So I'm over here and I'm trying to do real-time stuff, and I'm not sure if that's going to work. So I don't like that. Okay. Let me just talk it through. And Katie, maybe you could take some notes and we could put it in later. Or Aaron or somebody. So say in September, you get updated education on what's being handed down from the state. Make sure that you have a full understanding of what the state is requiring school districts to get to next year. And so that's the 3.5% cut. what states, what's happening with CISA, what's happening with the merger committee, those are only kicking off really in August to September. I mean, during the summer, those appointments are being made, and those committees aren't even meeting probably until, they aren't even required to meet until by the end of October, I think it is, or by October 15th, I think it is. So you're not going to get a whole lot out of them, but it's part of the context. So I'd really call it a context of budgeting this year. And Act 75, is it? Or 5? I forget.
73.
Okay, yeah, 70 something. Act 73 sets the context for your budget this year like no other year. Knowing that, the next budget session that you would have, which I would say is still probably not going to happen till October or the very first meeting in November, is your administration can bring to you what that would look like. If you're cutting 3.7%, how much money is that out of your budget? What does it look like?
That's
And
millions, not percentage.
it's millions. That's worse.
Yeah.
So,
For us, yeah.
Correct.
so what does that look like? So for example, what is it that your staffing costs you in certified staff? What does your staffing cost you in support staff? What are your required services, such as special education? What does your ends policy say? You're going to provide a rigorous education, so you need your academics in there. What is the impact? Because you're ultimately going to have to make decisions about what you're not going to be able to offer at $3.5 million.
When you say are you speaking of the board?
Yeah.
Okay.
But the work is done by the administration because they are who you have tasked to know the laws, to know the requirements, to understand the programs, bring the information to the board to say, we can no longer afford athletics, which brings the community out in hordes. We can no longer afford foreign languages. And concurrently, you're getting updates from your merger board representative and your CISA board representative. It's a very complicated process this year. You may need extra meetings in December and early January to deal with the information that comes in. Another thing that's different between school district and town is on December 1st, you get a recommended tax rate from the tax commissioner that means absolutely nothing. It really means nothing. It's what, if everybody spent the way they've been spending in the past, this is what the tax rate is probably going to be. And everyone goes up in arms. And then the legislature sits in January and they play with that number and they come back after your budget's approved and tell you what it's actually going to be. But it's still information you need to have. You get your enrollment and how that might change, and it might change the state money you're getting. You don't get that until the end of December. Your grand list numbers that impact your tax rate, you don't get until the end of December. So the flurry of activity around the budget really happens later in the process, mid-December to mid-January. Early in the process, you want the board to have as much understanding of the context as well as understanding of the impacts of actual cuts along the way. So when that flurry happens, you're able to move. And you want your community to understand what's happening along the way, especially this year, because the impact will be huge and it will make people not happy.
Jeannie, the reason I asked whether when you were using the word you were speaking to Katie or to the board.
Thank you. I'll try to protect that. The board ultimately decides, not the line items, but the board ultimately decides we are going to put forth a $42 million budget.
Let me finish asking my question. The reason I was asking that is it's unclear to me in a policy governance environment what the board's role is in the development of a budget. In my mind, the administration goes away with only the slightest bit of guidance from the board early in the process.
Yeah.
For example, the board's going to be made aware by the state that the cuts that we should expect are going to be in the range of $3.7 million. And so at the board table, we probably should we should probably bring that up so that the public is aware of the challenge that the district
Right.
faces in budgeting. But it
Right.
seems to me at that point, the board excuses itself from the process to a large degree, and the administration goes away and creates a budget that they're going to propose to the board for the board's approval in later January. Am I mistaken? We stay involved in the budgeting process?
So just like your community, yes. So the board's role in the budgeting process, and this isn't just policy governance, this is just the board's role for a school board system, is to kind of have that big picture. You have set an ends policy that you have told Katie you want her staff to achieve these ends for your students. Meanwhile, you have outside pressures on you about tax rates, particularly tax rates, and how much you can actually spend to achieve that. Your goal is to keep your eye on those things, those high level, what is $3.5 million? What is it that we have to cut? And what is it we think the community can live with? And what is okay within the current discussion of the state legislature? The board doesn't do the line item work. So when you're saying the board steps back, the board meets twice a month, maybe 3-4 times a month if you want to, but you're meeting for an hour or two periodically. You're not doing the line item work. That's where you step back between meetings, you have discussion, you kind of give guidance, and then you tell administration, okay, bring us something that looks more like this. The staff goes away and plays with those numbers because the staff understands what can and cannot be touched. For example, you have teacher contracts. You cannot change what you're paying, what you've committed to pay your teachers. What you can change is the number of teachers you have, but not what you've committed to pay them. So Katie comes back and says, we're going to have 20 fewer teachers. This is the impact. To offer as many electives at the high school or the middle school. We're just not going to have the staff to do that. And then you understand that as the board. And in non-merger discussion years, you would say, can we live with that? Or is our community willing to pay a little bit more so that we still have home ec? And the board makes that level decision, but the impact decision and the impact data comes at the administration level. So there is some back and forth because the board kind of wants to know the iterations that are happening. And ultimately, the real flurry, though, is after the tax impact information comes in, which is around December 31st. So the first 2 weeks and 2 to 3 weeks, I think it's third Monday, you have to decide. So the first 2 weeks of January is the most flurry. That help explain the role of so you don't actually go away. You kind of direct the administration. They go away, do their work, bring back any changes to that work. And they're getting new information from the state all along that process.
Jeanne, it's still not clear to me what the board's role is at the end of the day. We're gonna know when we start the process, say in September, that we've got a $3.7 million shortfall to account for. Is it appropriate for the board to direct the administration to eliminate specific programs or to eliminate specific staff? Should we tell the administration, make all your cuts by eliminating staff rather than programming? What's the appropriate level of direction from the board to the administration that doesn't violate policy governance?
The simple answer to that is you do not do that specific line cut. You have written an ends policy that has told Katie what she needs to build within the district. She may come back to you and say, I can no longer meet this part of the ends policy because we won't have enough staff to do this. And then you have to make adjustments. But she's the one who determines how she's going to use the resources that she's allowed to have towards meeting that policy. For the board to make that type of program specific or staff specific decision, you are not aware of what that impact might be within legal requirements. For example, a board could come back and say, we're not going to offer services to students in special education anymore. You and I both know that that's not a realistic thing to say, but a board could say that, and a board isn't allowed to do that. The staff knows how many minutes of math is required by the state. The staff knows how many minutes at the middle school level of PE is required to be provided, et cetera. So they have to work within all of that information. And for the board to just say, we've decided we don't like PE anymore, we can't afford it, won't work. So that's not your job, is the line level specific decisions. But with the decisions that you are making, Katie, you have to go away and cut $3.7 million. You would expect to understand the impact of what that $3.7 million is. And so Katie may come back and say, we have to make class sizes 40 students per classroom. That's the impact of $3.7 million. And you say, whoa, we know we can't have 40 students per classroom. What are our options? Those are the kinds of discussions that you would have. Does that answer your question?
Can I play out kind of like a real world scenario? Because I think it will be helpful. Yes, I hear what you're saying, Jeannie. I also know that obviously part of our work involves community input, right? And so the board might have a discussion and I might bring to you, like, this staff reductions have to happen. Here are some recommendations I have, or some proposals that, I put together with the administrative council for your consideration, knowing that the board ultimately owns the budget and needs to know the impact, and say, I'm hoping that we're going to have more engagement from our community because these stakes are going to be really high. And when I'm thinking about some of my colleagues and what they were up against when they were making significant reduction, you then get people who come and are really upset about what that might mean for programming, right? And maybe I'm saying at the other end of things, yes, but we do have the education quality standards that we have to adhere to through the state. So yes, it does mean that we have limited options. That's true. Anyway, but there are limited options. So I take, for example, what happened in a neighboring district last year when a lot of that work had been done over the summer with the administration. And they came to their board and they said, we're going to have to cut this specific world language. There's no way we can keep up with this because of these reductions that we have to make while adhering to the EQS. And there was so much significant outcry from the community about that the board ultimately was like, you can't make that reduction. And so the administration then had to go back and figure out where else that was going to come from. My prediction with this real world scenario and up against what we are anticipating here is that there's going to be a lot of that because the amount is so significant, that I'm just trying to predict, again, and tune here while we have this opportunity, how we might approach such a significant reduction together, knowing that this collaboration has to be so tight and so healthy in order to do this and not have some division occur among the community even.
I think for me, it's like, I don't wanna put more work on you than you're already doing. Because even though we know that this is looming, but like, what would make it easier for me, just from a second year new guy perspective, would be a list of nice to haves, a list of need to haves, and a list of, and like, maybe even a spreadsheet of what each thing costs in a big bucket. This is what each program costs, this is what each athletic program costs, this is what staff costs, this is what the government, the state gives us for funding for this program versus what we spend on it. Obviously we know that the required stuff by the state, we can't really touch.
I think that's,
Right,
maybe I assumed wrongly, but when we were talking about that budget context meeting, I thought that was going to be part of the budget context, of this is what we're spending, this is how we're spending in different programs, in different facilities, and different, and if not, then I think, per your point, that should be part of the budget context, education plus.
I think with the questions I was asking before, I was trying to reach a point where I could be comfortable honoring policy governance and not getting into the administration's realm of developing a budget that works for the district. At the same time that I want to have conversations all the way along at the board table, so our public understands what we're trying to accomplish, or what we face in cuts that's going to make some very significant changes to what their kids are experiencing in school every day. We can't just surprise them in January by saying, we've done away with athletics, busing, and English. You know, those are that's the kind of cuts we're gonna have to make to get there. Well, I think we need to have that conversation all the way along, and that starts to intrude on the administration's ability to work independently without us micromanaging budget development. But if we're not having those conversations, the public is gonna be just lambasted in January by the news that we're cutting substantial parts of the budget that they want and that we cannot have anymore. And I just think it's important that at the end of the day, it isn't the superintendent that's making $3.7 million of cuts to our budget. It's this board that's gonna have to suffer the consequences.
And understand the.
I don't want anybody thinking that it was the damn superintendent who can't budget her way out of a shopping bag that's caused this problem. It's all of us working together that have adopted a budget that's not very attractive to anybody that lives in this district and puts kids through these schools. So
So to make happen what you're talking about, Colin, to make happen what Daniel's talking about, and Jeremy and Katie, is to place it out on this annual plan. An annual plan can be changed if something else turns up, but think about it now. And it doesn't sound like we're going to have the answers to that today, but Daniel just clearly articulated the kinds of things that he needs to hear as you're contemplating $3.7 million. Those discussions are helpful to the administration as you're preparing budget iterations. It is an iteration process. And so making sure that you have time on every agenda to talk about wherever you are in that budget process is more crucial than ever when you're looking at $3.7 million cut. And you're right. Today, the board decides that $3.7 million is going to be cut, and you're going to understand why it's being cut from where it's being cut, and you're going to be able to answer the questions of your community. So, and all those discussions should be in public so that the community who's willing to follow understands how you got to where you got to. So the point of the exercise today is to make sure that you understand that you need to build in time all the way through a successful vote in March.
So probably makes sense to put budget in the governance process section every meeting.
Every meeting.
And then maybe the catch can is like, maybe we're adding a meeting here and there, but.
Want to say alternatively, we
Right.
scheduled some extra meetings through the fall so that we can focus on budget, and maybe that creates a little more visibility for the budget dilemma, if it's not just part of a regular board meeting, but it's held separately.
I wonder,
I don't know.
I guess my question
probably
too,
do both.
Jeannie, is would that be a finance committee meeting, or would that be a meeting of the board? Like, how might that operate, knowing also that we're pretty restricted by having a 5-member board? Like, it makes committee really difficult. is this an instance though in which maybe the focus is on that one committee of the board to meet?
No.
I-
The finance committee just had.
So if it
held
was
the
like
illegal finance committee
0.25,
meeting to say no.
Yeah, I think given the size of your
be a
board,
full
it's
board
up to
thing
the
Okay.
for
board.
that number. That 3.7 is something that Colin.
I'm just wondering if like that is a part of this whole scenario or not. Like, does that make sense too? In addition, we might add some meetings, but do we
Yeah.
also, is the finance committee alive and throughout all of this and helping in this regard too? Or is this all board all the time? Or what's the best?
It would be
Boards
nice if we had healthy committees running, subcommittees, but we don't.
Yeah.
I don't-
Yeah,
I don't think
small.
the two of us could add anything
No.
to the equation. The whole.
And what'll
board
happen
would be
is your
involved.
finance committee will bring the information back to the board, and your board, which is only double your finance committee, is going to end up discussing it all over again.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
Maybe no committee, because your whole board really, given your size of your board, you really want it all involved. But maybe you either acknowledge that you have budget meetings tacked on to your board meetings that the whole board attends. Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
So because you have the rest of the world to contend with, maybe if your board meeting starts at 6, maybe 5:30 to 6:30 is budget focus, and then start the official meeting at 6:30 or whatever your times are, whatever works for you. So that and that's particular for this year, because this year is going to be so incredibly unusual.
Next year.
God bless you, Katie. And all the rest of you too. It'll be
We're
tougher.
happy
So
that you're in North Carolina.
I know. Yeah, I know. I'm actually working with another board in 2 weeks to actually, so I don't have any answers for you right now, but to actually help them outline how they're going to deal with all of this. So I'll get back to you, Katie. But
Oh, good.
they're spending 2 hours just on that. But for the purpose of today, without all the answers, is you do want to ensure that through this first half of your year, you're focusing on Act 73 and budgetary impacts, and determine how you're bringing your community along.
So can we fill this form out a little bit? They don't have row numbers, so I'm gonna call it row number quarterly financial and row number budget. For the row
Okay.
number quarterly financial, I'm assuming that where we review something in September, that is our fiscal first quarter. I'm assuming that is the review of the prior fourth quarter budget. Is that a fair
Yep.
assumption?
Tell you how you ended your year and where you're starting.
So if that's the case, I don't know how long Jacob needs to close the books post.
I think our experience this year, I was a little bit surprised, but the books don't close for a long, long time after the end of the fiscal.
Yeah, end of August, really, even into September.
You recall when the audit report was delivered to the board?
I couldn't tell you.
That was shortly after the books were formally closed.
Right.
It's like February or March.
So if 3 months of a quarter happens, let's call that month 3. Month 4, I don't get to see the close. When do I get to see the books for 1 through 3?
I think we could ask, I shouldn't speak.
Do I get to see it on 4? Do I get to see
Well,
it
I
on-
think we can ask Jacob to present the April, May, June, fourth quarter of the year, say in September. But it's not absolutely finalized. There will be adjustments that the auditors will ask for at the 11th hour. So it's his in process fourth quarter. But
Okay.
we shouldn't wait 6 months after the
Yeah.
quarter ends to hear that there's something that we should be adjusting for.
Yeah, frankly,
So-
I don't even want to wait 3 months.
We
after the
really,
quarter.
ought to get on a cycle where we're getting quarterly financial reports. as soon
So,
as-
so Daniel, you should be able to get an estimate in June as to where it looks like the books are closing. There is some idea. It's not the final, you don't have things, reports filed with AOE, but there is a sense like, oh my God, we're ending 2 million in deficit. So now you need 5.7 million. That shouldn't be a surprise to you.
Okay, so where I'm going with this is, let's put this in, and so if January, February, March, first quarter, well, third quarter, whatever. Do I say in April, and when in April, like the first April or the second April, would Jacob have?
Let's
the
wait and
books?
let Jacob tell us when.
All right,
Yeah.
so then we're not
Humanly
filling out this row yet.
Well, here's my note. My note, if this helps at all, Daniel, is going to be, the board needs quarterly reports. September, what did I have written down? September, March.
September, December, and June.
And I'm gonna let him tell me.
Put it fine, put it in
Yes,
the right
like
box.
you tell us
When the right box. Right.
where this is gonna be,
And it would
because,
be the prior.
correct, because, and as Jeannie was saying, like, he knows, like, I mean, there's nothing surprising happening in these last months of the year. But I can tell you anecdotally that I approved a PO from last year earlier this week.
Right.
So that is a real thing.
And remember that Jacob is the finance
Yes,
department.
yeah.
Right.
And he does more.
Let's
If you don't
find
know,
out.
he already does a lot more than just the finances for this district.
Right. So that's why
So,
my,
yeah.
I want to give him a heads up.
Great.
And I also, we've been talking about, for example, just so you know, when these EL reports should happen that implicate him in the meeting to talk about the information that needs to be provided for you all. And I have said to him, this summer, when would you like me to plug these in? So I'm not interfering with your work when you
Perfect.
really need
Perfect.
to focus, because this year especially, we're asking him already for a bunch of modeling in relation to like what we could be doing in terms of budgeting. And so again, I just want you all to know, rest assured, we're being very mindful of like where we plug things in, so we're not overloading Jacob.
Got it, so.
Are you absolutely certain that the number is 3.7 at this point?
That's where Jacob has it right now.
And
A
there's
couple
no
of things remain to be seen. but
miracles coming from the state that's gonna
No.
reverse any of that.
I
Oh,
think
there's
the
no promises
The legislature yield bill is the problem, and they
Right.
wrote that and approved it.
You won't know if there's any miracle coming from the state until probably March.
Yeah.
Yeah, last year, as we started this process, I think we had 7 different variations from the state
Yes.
as we were trying to build the budget last year. And I think the 3.7, I think it was like 3.4, but with
initial.
Then it got,
with the increase of, again, just trying to figure out what does healthcare cost increase looks like, what is
We're
the
guessing right now.
the CBA increase look like, and so some of those things are more of a guess, but that but that 3.7 he has been pretty steady with, at least for the last few months.
Yeah.
So then for the next row, we're ignoring the first row, the next row, I think I've got bookends in my mind. The bookends in September is when I'd like to have that context meeting, which would give us updates on Act 73 and all of those contexts, as well as the context of this is what our programs cost. This is what each facility, each building costs to run. This is a la Jeremy. The other bookend is the last date when we have to approve a final budget before the meeting. Those are the two ends. Between them, I think we need to work on, let's probably work backwards from the date we need to approve what kind of iterations we want, knowing that we can't go backwards past it.
and remember, we still have one more contract that's not approved yet. So we don't know yet what that's gonna happen.
Which one?
Support staff.
That's you, right? You're doing that?
That's you.
Oh.
That's
No, I
you.
thought that's right.
That's Jeremy.
Mediation service.
We're in mediation. Any projection for when that?
Not yet.
Okay.
So, yeah, there's so many things that are unknown. But I think you have the idea now, and I think Daniel captured it and Colin captured it.
So I see here annual meeting. Can we work backwards? When's the meeting? Is it 3/3? Is it 2/20/2/17? When's the date we want to have our vote?
You don't get to choose that one. Your
That's
annual
the-
meeting
the
has been set in
120.
your bylaws.
It's
It needs to be printed before the annual meeting. When's the meeting that we?
late January, we have.
Vote.
to-
January.
So it's gonna be the 120 meeting, is that it?
Yes, that is your drop dead date
Okay.
in order to meet your obligations.
Is this it,
To-
budget Q&A and presentation? That's what we mean by final vote? Okay.
Yeah.
And then I see we've got one before. Do we actually want one every single meeting? It looks like it's skipping.
Thank you for
One-
your recommendation.
For,
Yeah, as a
for budget, I think
Yeah.
it's an every
Okay,
meeting
absolutely.
thing.
So
I
instead of-
can-
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
every meeting, all the way back into September?
Yep.
Okay, let's do it.
With the idea that there will be several extra meetings perhaps, if we have to spend inordinate amounts of time to work through whatever you're bringing us for use.
And I think it's like budget with the caveat of like what's underneath that as a bullet of what the actual discussion around the budget will be. So that we plant it in there, knowing that there will be different budget related topics that we'll be discussing.
And is
Yeah.
it our intent, let's say on the 9/16, we're discussing budget, is it our intent that at the close of that discussion, we have given some input and guidance to the superintendent and our finance director of what we would like to be discussed on the 10/7 meeting? Continuing that, is that our intent as we put these on the work plan?
I mean, one thing I might just say, is that just like the quarterly reports, I might wanna run this by Jacob just to see, because so much of this is gonna be dependent on some modeling that he's able to do.
Mhm.
And
So-
any updates from the state.
Yeah.
Because that
And any
changes
changes.
all the
Exactly,
time.
so I do wonder if maybe an early conversation, and, you know, some of it's happening now and right here, is like, what might the board like to see
Mhm.
that Jacob could then produce? I think it gets really hard for him when we're asking him on the spot or not giving him enough
Right.
time.
Sure.
But if there are a number of things that we know, like it was helpful to hear you just say, like, we wanna know what things like cost by building. We want a breakdown of what certain, you know, what are we spending on, you know, services we have to provide to students on IEPs, for example. We can do all of that. We just need to know what it is you might like to review so that we can then provide it to you and have time to do that.
And Jacob may have opinions on that as well.
Yes.
He may
So
say, this is the time of year after enrollment comes out in early October. This is the time of year where I could tell you what our enrollment is and therefore what our class sizes look like. You know, I mean, there are things that he knows has come in at certain times of year.
I'm with Daniel. I think we need to schedule that in September. And if Jacob feels that pushing it out one more meeting or two more meetings makes the result much better, then that would be fine. But I think we need, as soon as possible, we need the entire community to be aware of what's going on so that this becomes less of a monumental shock and just a series of smaller shocks.
Yep. So you are getting a good concept then of what the annual agenda is. You're not going to be able to complete it today because there does need to be some work done outside of the meeting to get information from like Jacob or your curriculum director or opportunities like that. I, again, arbitrarily chose dates for the remaining internal monitoring reports. I chose EL5 to go in October because that's usually, it really speaks to the budget process. It's not a huge one to pull together, actually. But Jacob may say that's not the best time for that particular one. So I tried to leave a whole bunch of open time this year in that November through January process. I don't think yeah, EL4 does not go on the annual meeting date. That should have been 3/17. I'm sorry. It didn't transfer over. EL7 asset protection can come right after that, perhaps, or 2 months after that. So those are recommended, but may not fit your district schedule. This is really to give you an idea of what should be in there. But every agenda, if there's not an internal monitoring report on the agenda, you don't have to put it on the agenda. But having an annual work plan, you're not trying to recreate it each time. Where you look at your remaining policies yourselves, that is for the board to decide. The BM delegation and the governance process. Governance process, I want to talk about a little bit. This is where, when Erin said, or Katie, when do we talk about PBC updates? When do we talk about, a number of different things? That's really, the board is taking action on these things and discussing them both. So that's part of your governance process on your agenda, and you just build them in where they need to go. Along with doing a board self-evaluation, maybe schedule 6 to 8 throughout the year, because you sometimes do have meetings that go too long and you don't do it. When your board learning is going to happen, both of those things are in policy. And when you're going to talk to your community, you're going to talk to the community through budgeting process. You're going to look for opportunities. Developing an actual community linkage plan is probably a good idea. And then I added federal and state mandated policies because they're almost outside of the work that you have to do. You have to approve them. I did not put them in there from the work that Erin had done, but you have to approve them, but it's almost pro forma, as we already talked earlier. Ultimately, you're going to get to yeah. You're going to get to a document that's not too far off from what you're already doing. Let's give it a second to catch up. Just showed up for me. It's just showing up for me now. Agenda's missing. What I want to show you is what it then becomes when each meeting, something went wrong with screen sharing. Still try again. When each meeting agenda is done, it's not randomly put together. It's not reactive. That's why I don't like doing this virtually.
Jeannie, is it fair to say that, like, barring, because I appreciate what you did with the governance processes, and capturing what kind of might fall in there.
Yeah.
So it's fair to say that, like, really, if we're looking at our annual work plan, we can see the agendas, they're all there. And then really, ideally, what falls outside will be like an executive session or something like that might be added. But predictably,
right.
Really, anyone could look at this and say, oh, on the 3/17 meeting, I can expect to see these items. Maybe there's a proposed executive session. Maybe there's one more item added to the governance process. But inherently, it's all there already. The pieces are there and it's all predictable if it's running
Right.
in a healthy way.
Right. And something might occur in a meeting that you decide, no, that's not what you need to see. that you decide you want to have that you're going to add. You're going to pull it out and say, is this where we want it to go? You have an agenda that a plan for the year that's going to kind of guide you. I'm sorry, but it won't let me share my screen anymore. It just won't let me. It's telling me that it's not working, which is obvious to me as well.
If I may, because we've got about 15 more minutes left in our agenda. So the next row then would be the internal monitoring reports for EL. So in order to fill that out, do we have a list of those monitoring reports, like a list of, how many are there?
Jeannie already put them
Yes.
in, so I did the first 5 last year, so 5 are plugged in for this year.
And that's the entire universe of them.
Yeah, there's 10
No.
total.
So, wait, so if there's 10, why?
No?
So I did 5 last year, I'm gonna do 5 this year, because, what I've been told is that typically for new superintendents, it makes sense to spread them across your first 2
Okay.
years. And then the next years, you're kind of doing all of
So
them. at once.
next year, you anticipate this row would have 10.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So that very first page I had you look at today, that was the list of your internal monitoring reports.
Okay.
And you'll see which ones are already done last year and which ones are still available for this year. And that's what I,
Great. And so then the next row, the incidental reports, is that also something, Katie, you put in and you're happy with it? And
Yeah, I think
Okay.
like, I think my, I like the addition of like having reports to you all.
Great.
And what I am envisioning for that, just so you know, and if it's all right with you, I want the board to like feel good about this. What I was thinking of asking, and I remember my previous superintendent asking for this, is I would just pull, most of the time, I would just pull out a newsletter that I most recently sent out to the community, hand it to the superintendent, and then that would be provided in materials for each school. And then I would provide my own report to you all, pretty concise, but just kind of like, hey, this is what's happening, you know, over the course of the last few weeks. You can see this referenced in some things, or anything that's come up that I think you all should know about. The other thing that I'm looking to add for you all are departmental updates. So I think I might ask for, you know, I mean, and this is aside from like a quarterly report from Jacob or something like that, and I might leave Jacob alone on this.
Yeah.
But I might,
Yeah.
instead of, you know, Jonathan coming to multiple of our meetings, ask him to just write up a report that I can include in the packet for you all to review. And then if you get it in advance of the meeting, and you're like, ooh, I've got some questions about that, can you ask him to attend actually? Then we can do it that way. I'm trying to think about ways that we're working a little bit smarter on our end to inform you on your end. So there might be less questions, or if you have them, we can make sure they're answered in real time at the meeting.
Okay.
you have a policy called 2.8, EL 2.8, which is communication and support to the board. And that's what Katie is referring to. Anything that doesn't, this is more incidental information. It's a combination of what background information might you need for anything on the consent agenda or the state and federal policies we're asking you to approve. Like maybe it's background information for a bus bid, or tuition approval is actually formulaic, but she can tell you what that is. So you're about to take action on something and she can provide the background. But then what other incidental information does she think would be good for the board to know, so that you're kind of current as to what's happening? And this isn't information that you would act on, but you have it. And when you're stopped in the grocery store, you know that the 7th grade is really focusing on environmental science this year, or whatever it is you need to know. And that is incidental, but it also keeps you informed as a board member, not necessarily at the governance level, but just at the what's happening in the district level.
Great. So the next row, I'm noticing that all of the columns are blank. Are there internal PG monitoring reports, and what are those? Where should we schedule them?
Very good question. Those belong to the board. Board evaluates or monitors its own board management delegation, and the board monitors its own governance process, the GP internal PG monitoring. I didn't plug them in there. On that first page that you have, where you had, that I gave you when we started this session, It also lists your BMs and your GPs policies. And it tells you what you did this last year and what's coming, wasn't considered this last year that you should consider this year reviewing. So that tells you what they are, and you'll decide where you think you want to plug them in.
So there are 5 of them. So should we decide when we want these 5?
Sure could. You have 13
I'll
minutes
tell
left.
you last year, and I don't know how much involvement you want to have, but last year, last year was like, Aaron and I just adopted this tool from Winooski.
Okay.
And just like, we filled it in.
Okay.
And then we brought it to the board and we were like, here's where you are and here's what you're doing. I don't know, you might want to approach it
We
differently.
each signed up for, cause
Yeah, there was certain
we
ones.
each signed up for a
Yes.
specific policy.
And we plugged it in, so.
Yeah, it has like the name on the other side of
Yeah.
the
Right,
dot.
yeah.
And when?
Yeah. So that's something you can all decide and then we can plug that in for you.
We also need to get into the formal agenda, the consideration of policy
I'm
resolutions.
sorry, I didn't hear you.
We need,
Right.
recall, I asked and never got any attention on generating resolutions for VSBA.
Okay, that's fine, yeah, I just
There's a
didn't. hear you.
June 15th deadline to have those things there, and we didn't spend any time on that. We pay for a VSBA membership, they go off lobbying on stuff that isn't what we're interested in them doing, because we're not speaking up and telling them what we want them to lobby for.
So in which row, and then which column will figure out the dates, but in which row do we put things like new policies? Do we put things like determined policies for VSBA recommendation? Which row does that go?
Are you talking about
To plan it in, yeah.
board governance policies or these VSBA
Right,
regulations?
right, if we were gonna do that resolution, and let's plan it in, so we have it on whatever date, so we have a column for it. In which row does it go?
Okay, for resolutions that you want to try to submit, or that you want to submit to VSBA, the resolution needs to be something that the board is concerned about. They're concerned about the way, I can't think right off the top of my head. You're concerned about the
She
way
says we're drawn out.
Just,
what?
yeah, just about anything. We
Just-
just don't-
well,
that the
yeah,
legislature
that the
does.
VSBA are not doing, that we think they should be doing.
Right.
And then there is a way to write that resolution up, and then you send it off to the VSBA, and the VSBA's resolution committee makes 1 of 3 decisions on it.
Right.
Which then goes to the annual VSBA meeting, to the state meeting in October. And everyone has a vote to vote either to decline it, to keep it for 1 more year, whatever their decision is.
What I'm talking about is we need to nail down our practice to get policy recommendations, resolutions to VSBA timely.
Right.
Right.
So you need to know the deadline.
We need
Same,
to
deadline.
reserve.
If the
spot
deadline is
in-
June 15th, then you want to start having discussions in early May, is basically what you're saying. So in early May, you
a
want
lot
an
easier-
agenda
A lot earlier than May.
under governance process, under
So-
board actions, governance process, you would just put
The board has to,
Under
Say
governance
yes.
process, which row? There's many rows in there.
the board actions, I think it would go. It doesn't get its own, row, but board, that's where kind of miscellaneous number of things that board does. So under that,
Would you time it? I'm assuming you would probably want to time that work kind of toward the end of the legislative session or so, or what? Is that why typically you're saying early May? Because at that.
no, I'm saying early May because VSBA had been sending out reminders recently saying, get any resolution wording in by June 15th. So if you know the deadline to get it into VSBA's June 15th, then count back a couple meetings so that you have the time to do that.
You
So
could
that's why
submit them at any time up until June 15th, or no?
I believe so.
I guess my question then is separately, when is the most ideal time, given that I think a lot of what the board might want to consider is parallel to the legislative session and potentially wanting to be responsive to that? What,
I actually good question. I actually would add a new row under governance processes that say, given what you just said, because this is part of what the board does, legislative advocacy.
Exactly.
And then you're knowing what you need. You're having discussions throughout the year. You're going to know that you may decide under legislative advocacy that you're going to bring in a local legislator to talk to you before the session begins. You will get from VSBA what their deadlines are for resolutions. You understand that in January, February, a lot is happening around budget stuff at the legislative level as well, because they also get shocked at school spending. So you can just kind of build those things in there. So I would give yourself another row and call it legislative advocacy.
And with everything that's going on in the state of Vermont right now, that's, in my mind, that's a line that could show up in any agenda of any meeting all year round, because something's going on that we'd like to have a voice in. So,
And sometimes the way boards deal with that is they just put it on there as an item, and they maybe assign a board member who has a special interest in that to bring reports forward. VSBA is very good at keeping you up to date on what's happening in the legislature. But
there could very well be some meetings where there just isn't anything to talk about, but the line ought to be reserved so that if there is something cooking in Montpelier, we've got an opportunity to raise our hand and be made, make them aware of what we're thinking. You know, the end result might be that we've decided that we're just going to communicate with our 3 senators, 2 representatives.
So what you do have in front of us now, given the time, is you do understand, you have in front of you an annual agenda planning. If you need to add categories, like we just did legislative advocacy, because you know it's going to be regular, or if you want to add a budget all by itself under which I think we did under governance process, maybe not. So you want to add that as a line item itself. You'll be able to do that. Then from this discussion, there are things that have to happen between Nancy as chair and Katie as conduit to the staff to figure out when things are. And I would expect that Nancy and Katie would then jointly bring back a lot of these things filled in, but you're also going to be thinking about the kinds of things that Colin just thought about, like the budget, the legislative advocacy. Daniel, I think you really have a good sense of what it means to fill this in. You're just not quite sure where the topics are coming from. So hopefully that helped clear some of that up for you, like the internal monitoring reports, et cetera. But there becomes a flow to the year. You can even look at last year's agendas if you want and say, is there anything that we did talk about that we feel we should again? But this creates a flow for the year, and you have a sense, you have a clear sense. And so when agendas show up in front of you, the agenda I cannot show you right now, when they show up in front of you the weekend before your meeting, you know where it came from. It wasn't just in Nancy's head or Katie's head, or it's been planned out. And if something comes up in a meeting that you want to carry on to the next meeting, you just write it on the annual agenda work plan at that meeting. You agree as a board that you're going to carry it over. So it ends up with what agenda, whichever one you choose.
So I don't think we can fill, I mean, obviously, a couple more minutes, but we can't fill this out. I guess I would just want to make sure that for the next section, the governance process, that we are reviewing all of them. If there are reports that they're scheduled in there, if they're to be reviewed, that it's on through the year, that all of them, we're holistic and looking at everything.
What are we doing in the next retreat?
We're going to continue this The original intention was to make sure that this is kind of completed, this annual plan process and your agenda planning process, and then move into, in particular, focusing on monitoring. What the monitoring report should look like, what you should expect to see, what the evaluation of the superintendent therefore looks like, and your policy around that. What do you think?
That was my next question. Take some examples of good monitoring. But I guess my suggestion was gonna be, after Daniel has struggled to figure out where to plug some stuff in, why don't we just let that come back to us at the next meeting with as much of it populated as
That's
possible?
what I said. Yeah.
I'm gonna nominate Daniel to participate in.
Well, I thought it was
They,
next.
they want to
Yeah, I
try,
think so.
but that's what I said. Katie has to go back to her staff to figure out some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Daniel may join that, that might be something to consider, is help make that
Just leave
happen.
Jacob alone for it.
Yeah. Seriously.
Daniel clearly has.
Remember too that we're an hour shorter than next time. Next time will be 3 hours.
Okay.
Today's only 2 hours.
It
Except
is?
for the,
I've
well,
got 2 to 5.
Me, it's only 2
got
hours.
two
We have
hours.
an executive
Executive
session
session.
next.
we
For
were
an hour?
working
For
on
an
this.
hour?
And next time I'll be in person,
Yeah.
which is
So-
more, I think.
My question is I know we kind of adopted this format from Winooski last year. We never made it public. Now that we're getting the new site, can we make this public?
Yeah.
So then, even if it's a
Yes.
work in progress,
The intention
Yes.
is to have it.
they can go,
Yeah.
like, so anybody in the town can go out and find, hey, this is what we're.
And this year's version
Projecting.
is much cleaner
Yes.
than last year,
That's a
because
really-
last year
that's an
I had no idea what
So,
any of
and that
this
was
You
the
did-
intent, I think, all
Aaron.
along. It's just that last year was a very reactive year.
But there needs to be a lot of elaboration so that a mere mortal can look at it and really understand what it all means.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be really.
Collaboration.
Well, and
It's
what-
not the
ChatGPT helps a lot.
And what Aaron was excellent at last year too, in addition to like plugging these things into the Winooski template, which we really like, was just like linking after the fact minutes, agendas, so that like
That's-
anyone again from the public can
Copy of
either
the policy.
go, can just go to the annual plan and
Yeah.
access that information there in addition to going to the website and just clicking on the minutes or whatever. So
That's a really nice addition.
it's really helpful because there are different entry points for different people who want to dig in a little more deeply. Here you go. So yeah, that's the intention.
Can I go off track for just a second, even more than normal? Jeannie, have you got any experience with board docs?
Oh, yeah. Actually, I used to use board docs when I was in Burlington.
And would you say that that might be a good product for us to use for board meeting communication and archiving of minutes and so forth, and
Yes.
the
Yes,
policy repository?
Can we afford it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
No,
That's the first
no,
question.
no, that, I'm saying yes, that's the question.
Oh, okay.
Not when we're cutting 3.7
My answer
million
to you is yes, and I have seen boards do a better job without spending the money on board docs. And I'm happy to share
But
those.
those may be bigger districts that have IT capabilities and
Well, they have an
have
administrator.
people tucked away that can do that kind of stuff. A small
Um,
district can really benefit from some kind of an organizational tool like that. There are
Yeah.
several other products out there now.
Yeah, I have seen Google Drive used very well. And I'm happy to share some examples of that from some other boards. Board docs is good. To be honest, in board docs, I got a little frustrated sometimes at the way they added their attachments. And I found Google Drive to be more efficient, but I'm happy to share those things with Katie and Aaron and, but I did use board docs for several years. But I'm not sure they were worth the cost.
Thank you.
And
Jenny.
policies should just go on your web. I don't think policies would go in board docs anyway. I think
They do.
Thank you very much, Jenny. I'm
Thank you.
sorry to cut you off, but we really.
you have an
gonna
executive
be
session.
right
Thank
on-
you all.
Yeah, we got it. Thank you
I
so
look
much. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.
I look forward to
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think-
All right, I have, yes, I have public comment. Do we have anybody online? Where are you? Rick?
We got one in the room.
We got one in the room. Nance, any public comment?
My only comment, for those of you who are wondering why anybody would come.
That crossed my mind.
Yeah, I'm sure it did. I was on the VSBA when this policy governance was first introduced. So I read John Carver's book. I took the initial training from the video from John Carver. I wasn't fond of it then. And I was hoping to be, I would like to see how it's, through the iterations, then how it's being presented now. For a long time after that, the VSBA adopted it. It took a number of years before school districts actually got onto it. I think Randolph was the first one that did
I
it.
think so too.
And since then, more and more school districts have come on board. So anyhow, that's my interest, and I just want to know more how policy governance, because I need to be convinced that I shouldn't be skeptical.
I have, I don't know, probably 11 years of policy governance experience in Wisconsin before joining this board. And I hate it and love it at the same time.
Well, I
It is
heard a lot of
pain in
things
the
I
ass,
liked.
but it's
To me,
got a
the
lot of-
biggest policy that this board or any school board does, your biggest policy is your budget. And people don't really think of the budget as policy. And how do you reconcile your budget? And I know this, I hear this year, all problems that you've got. But outside of that, reconciling your ends policy, which I need to understand better. How do you reconcile your ends with your budget? And the other piece about policy governance that I've heard mentioned today, which was encouraging, is how, as a board, you are the conduit between the school district and the community. And how can you be that conduit if you don't have the information to get out to the community?
I think that's.
And
the
And
biggest-
those were two of my things about policy governance that I'd like to see how it has been
That's
managed.
maybe the biggest weakness in policy governance that I'm aware of, is that people in the community don't understand that the board is taking the hands-off position on it,
Right.
everything, and leaving a professional management team to actually run the business.
Right, and that's exactly what I felt when it was first presented. It's a business model, not a school district model. But, it has probably gone through iterations. It's probably better now. I heard Kate say a lot of things that were encouraging on how you're going to, move to contact the community,
I wouldn't,
conduit into the community
I
more
wouldn't
than.
wanna see us move away from it.
No, I
But
say
would
there's a
love to
lot of
see
things.
us Use it much more appropriately than we do
And
now.
there's, I mean, I chaired the school board for 10 years, and
As-
I know that you, need to get away from people who count toilet paper rolls in the school building. So I understand that concept of the whole thing too. So,
For me, coming from the junior perspective, like, I want the licensed professionals to make the decisions and then just bring that information to me. Because, I mean, it was learning by fire hose, you know, like, just attending a couple, like, maybe even like 10 meetings wasn't enough for me to know what exactly I was stepping into.
And, you know, under any circumstance, no
Yeah.
matter what format we
Right.
use, that's how it's gonna work anyhow. But anyhow, that's why we're all thinking, what is this thing you're doing?
Great to see.
I used to
That's-
attend these and sit in that chair over there, so
Yeah.
I understand it.
So, that's why.
Thank you.
Thanks for
you.
coming.
Thank
Nancy.
you.
Thank you.
And I'd like to follow up when I know some of the further, information is coming on policy governance, so I really do want to learn more about it. So, anyhow, thank you.
Thank you.
Rest of the business, and I've got to go over the.
Yeah, I got another one for you too, right after this.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks,
That was very
Nancy.
informative.
Thank
It
you.
was very good.
Tell them all no at your next meeting.
Pardon?
Tell them all no. We can't afford to abate anything.
Right.
Are there any other public comments? Okay, then I need a motion for us to come out of this board meeting to go into executive session one V.S.A. 313A1F, confidential attorney-client communications made for the purpose of providing professional legal services to the body.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Okay, and for what I was told by Bernie, this is the only thing we have to read for this one. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? No. Okay, is Bernie online?
We've got to switch to a different.
Yeah,
we're
we've
still
got
in
to
our
turn
public
this
Yeah,
meeting
if you
off.
want to take
Yeah,
a
I'm gonna,
quick break.
I need to just grab my phone out of my car.